I've got a couple slides that I'm going to share with people to start with, but before we get going, why don't let's take just a minute, and I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, give just a brief background on where they are, kind of what their groups are, so that everybody's got an understanding of where they're coming from.
Hi, I'm Michelle Perkel. I am a media director at EVERSANA INTOUCH. I work with a team of media planners and buyers, where we do the strategy and execution in addition with our different subject matter experts. A full service agency, so we do it all.
Great. Hi, I'm Liz Mansell. I am a group director at the practice at J3. I've been at IPG agencies working in HCP media for the last 11 years. Currently, my team is made up of mostly planners, so we do the planning for Janssen, and we also have specialized craft teams for certain channels.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Akhbari. I'm currently working with Evoke Media. A little bit about my team is they're the folks who have their hands on the keyboards, meaning they are the planners, buyers, the analytics. So when they're looking at your campaigns, they're the ones who make the decision. So I'm really excited to be here, and also not to take up too much time, I always tell everybody when I do these conferences, yes, I work for Evoke, but I'm taking my Evoke uniform off, work with you guys to answer your questions. How do we work together in this process?
Thanks, folks. Just starting off, I wasn't going to do this, and this morning I decided, you know what, I'm going to share just a few things to provide a little bit of context in terms of what we're going to be talking about today, which is digital. So when some of this data is from our sources and interaction study, some of it's from our digital insights study. But when we look at how frequently physicians broadly are saying that they're going online for professional purposes, you know, you've got 20% saying that they're going online for professional purposes 8 or more times a day. And the vast majority are going on at least 2 or 3 times a day, 5, 6 times a day, 8 times a day. You know, when we think about why digital is so important, this is where they're living. I mean, if they're not interacting with patients, this is where they're spending their time and getting their information. You know, we've seen over years that it's not just computers, obviously. I mean, smartphones are being used by 90% or more of physicians today. A little bit less on the tablet side. I mean, it looked like it was growing back in the early, 2010s or whatever, and that's flattened out and has sort of decreased over time. So when we're thinking about where they're accessing information online, it's sort of this combination of almost 50-50 with laptops, computers, mobile devices kind of split right down the middle. So how much time are they spending in an average week accessing different types of medical content? Well, 87, almost 90 minutes a week is being spent on professional portals ranging from an up-to-date Medscape, sites like that. 62% or 62 minutes in a week are being spent on print. So print, as we all know, hasn't gone away in importance. It's actually the second place that they're spending time. 52 minutes a week are being spent on medical journal websites. So the portals, the websites together, spending about 45 minutes a week on professional social media. And you can kind of see as you go through, I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting is only 20 minutes a week being spent on pharma sites. So, the content-driven sites, third-party content, as opposed to pharma is really where they're spending their time. They're spending more time today, at least the same amount of time, more time in a lot of cases, reading medical content compared to past. So when they're diagnosing a patient condition, 37% are saying that the most important source of information is those professional portals, specifically ones that are subscription-based, so UpToDate, as an example, or Clinical Keys. The other portals fall sort of in the middle. You've got disease-specific websites, you've got medical journals online, medical journals in print. I mean, these are all being used on a regular basis. When they're making prescribing decisions, sort of the same thing, except drug reference mobile apps pop up as the second most important of the sources that they're relying on. And then when it comes to learning about new drugs and devices and procedures, again, the portals are the top, but then CME meetings, medical journals online, sales reps pop into this list. So, I think, again, we're not in an environment where a single tactic is the way to get the message out. But what is very clear is that the digital sources of information are at the top of the list, and increasingly so, year over year. Pop through a couple of these. You've got people getting email newsletters. A lot of publishers are putting out email newsletters. They're getting 6.5 newsletters each week. They're only reading about 3. They're reading newsletters that have curated articles based on their specific interests. So, I mean, targeted content. And then, any kind of a weekly recap or whatever is important to them. They're getting 3.5 promotional or marketing emails that they receive, and they're only reading 1. And you've got about a quarter of them who have separate email accounts for all the promotional stuff that they get. So, their main email is something that they're using with colleagues and with their associations, and then you got a quarter that are getting emails in like a read later folder, if you will. Social media, I mean, it's something that we're going to be talking about, but you've got 33% who say that they're never using social networks for professional purposes, but you've got people at the other extreme, 20%, give or take, who are once or twice a day going onto social media for professional purposes. Skip through that. Are they clicking intentionally on ads? You've got 20% saying that they've clicked on ads accidentally. You've got 30% saying that they're intentionally clicking on ads, and a lot of people who at least like to say that they're not clicking on ads at all. So, again, when we think about some of the challenges that we face, getting people to do the things that we want them to do, what the physicians themselves are saying is, yeah, no, I don't want to go there. So how do we change that so that it's engaging and getting people to move through? And then one more thing is another point that we talk about is how they feel about ads and content being targeted to them on a professional or content and advertising on those sites. And 40% feel that targeted content is beneficial. Only 23% say that targeted advertising is beneficial. They probably don't necessarily know what they're seeing in terms of targeting, but again, this is just sort of this context of what we're going to talk about now for the next hour and a half is where is digital today and where are we going with it? So that's sort of the context. So we'll turn it over now to the panel. Let's start off by just talking about the overall digital landscape today. Like, how do you define digital? I mean, if you go back 10 years, I mean, it was publication websites and Medscape and a few other things like that. But when you're looking at digital, when your clients are asking you to think about digital, what's included in that today? You want to?
Yeah, I could take that to start. I mean, I would say digital would be just about everything online. I mean, when you really look at it, we want to capture where the audience is, and a lot of these things, be it on web pages, digital out of home, everything is essentially digital. From a planning and a buying standpoint, there could also be different definitions of it as well. I mean, it really depends on the client, their ecosystem, how it's being measured, how it's being looked at. So there is no one way to define digital, in my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think there's also more traditional channels that are now being digitized. So you have digital out of home, you have connected TV. So there's these traditional channels that are now starting to onboard into the digital realm. So that's like a really exciting space too. What's coming up?
And from my point of view, or the team's point of view, is that we look at it as touch points. I use this example over and over again. If I played you a song right now and say, hey, 5 o'clock, sing me that song, you're going to go, what song, James? But if I played it a couple of times, it can't be that great, but let's say if I played it a few times throughout the day, you won't be able to sing it word for word, but you know it. So we look at things as touch points. And, you know, the digital landscape is like, how many times I could touch this ACP to really get it ingrained, like, yes, I saw it. So we look at digital as different types of touch points.
You know, Liz, you mentioned like connected TV and digital out of home and things like that. Are we seeing are a lot of things that have been going on for a while in the consumer sphere beginning to trickle into the HCP space?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think more and more plans are having that consumer-esque element to them. I'd say even in certain specialties or certain types of products, it leans better towards, I think. But yeah, I don't think I have any plans that don't have some type of more what would be considered a consumer channel, like programmatic, display, DTV, social. All of them have at least one component of those in them.
And just to add too, when we do connected TV, we also look at it at I hate to say it, at a younger ACP demo who are familiar with, that knows what these apps are. You know, there's an older demo too. And then we also look at these connected TV options for PAs, nurses, RNs, and like how the landscape has been changing in the healthcare field. These PAs and NPs are spending more and more time with the patient, so they are part of the decision metrics too.
Yeah, like ultimately, I mean, while we're talking HCPs here, they are the end consumer that we're looking to reach. They will do, you know, they'll be on the internet, they'll be on social media, they'll be reading print journals. It's a matter of understanding that individual and that subset and reaching them where they actively are and how they're consuming. So really just a consumer-centric focus, regardless of who the end consumer is.
You know, it's interesting because I mean, you mentioned touch points, and when you think about like old metrics of like reach and frequency, right, where digital gives this great opportunity for lots of touch points throughout the day. You're reaching them where they are, but is it harder now to gauge like how much of a specialty you're getting to? Is that even important anymore? Or is it more important just to make sure that you're out there where they are and you're hoping that you're getting the right people with the right frequency and getting enough of them? And
I can take that one. I think reach and frequency is still one of the main KPIs we look at because KPIs are so different across every single channel, but what you can typically get out of most channels is an understanding of reach and frequency. And there's been, my clients constantly debate like, what KPI is a leading indicator to ROI? And often it's like, well, none of the media metrics really correlate that much, but reach and frequency do. So it really is getting in front of the right people at a certain number of times.
Yeah, like fundamentally, we wouldn't want to go away from reach and frequency, but it's just a matter of being able to layer in other things to it so that we could be smarter and, you know, while you're still hitting those numbers, hit them in the right way.
Frequency should also be considered, you know, how engaging that frequency is. Is it, oh, I saw a X ad to, oh, I engaged in deep content. But that's like the advanced class, but, you know, it also depends on budgets, but it's just something to think about too. When we talk about frequency, is it a banner or is it something sticky?
Yeah, yeah. So where, if you think about the relationship with the publishers, what kind of information are they providing or could they providing that would help with just that kind of analysis? And you know, are you getting the metrics from them that you really need to understand whether to evaluate whether you know you're getting that reach and frequency that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think for the most part, physician level data is a pretty, standard piece of data that we all ask for. So for the most part, we're getting it. I know certain societies want to have some privacy, which I respect that, and there's value there, and they're priced appropriately because they know they're not giving you everything too. So for the most part, we do get the data. We need to at least have a pretty solid understanding of reach across the campaign.
And just to add too, we're in the agency world kind of a feedback sticky point when it comes to a lot of our clients. If you're the client, you just spent X number of $1 million on your website. These websites are not that great. They get updated really rare. The SEO is awful. But they spent all this money. This is what they convinced their corner office. Keep talking and you guys can enjoy the feedback. But make a long story short, we still have to drive traffic to the site, even though it's not that great. So when we look at analytics, part of the ecosystem is driving to the site because you saw that graphic. It's only 23% actually come to the site. It's not a great site, but that's how they show the corner office that it's working. So that's one thing as a publisher you got to consider: stickiness, and then, okay, am I driving traffic to the site? Yeah.
Yeah, but I honestly don't even know. Like, yes, there's a lot of information on brand.com, but the HCPs don't really want to go there. And often I still think the impact at that first exposure has a lot of stickiness to it too. And we've seen that in like programmatic click-through rates are terrible. But the ROI is there because the efficiency is there and the frequency is there. So yeah, the HCP like websites and like they could obviously do a lot there, but they invest a lot in them, and there is that I know we were talking about like they don't really want to spend more money creating a different microsite that's not theirs because they do look at their site metrics, but a lot of paid media has high bounce rates. It's not always like it's outside of paid search. What the other channels are more about that first exposure, I think.
Yeah, and I would say it comes back to frequency, where an HCP or any end user might not necessarily click the first time they see a message, but they see it a few times, something piques their interest, and with the ultimate goal of driving them to the site to learn more, driving them to take the next action. So that is, definitely important to have the multiple touch points in the multiple areas. And I would say from a verification standpoint, PLD probably would be that way to prove that, to show that everything's working. But yeah, ultimately, I would agree. Like a lot of the KPIs are driving to the sites. Definitely, there's a time and a place, and hopefully that there's learnings that would be interesting and informative to the HCPs there, kind of wrap everything together.
Are your teams getting involved in paid search? I mean, is that a part of things? Do they are they involved in SEO as well, or just the paid component?
We have different subject matter experts. We all work closely together. So the greater teams are all involved in making sure that everything is seamless.
My teams are actually, as I said, they do soup to nuts. So they're doing paid search to social.
When you're thinking about paid search, just out of curiosity, is there a clear delineation between an HCP target and a consumer target? I mean, Google is Google, right? I mean, there isn't an HCP Google. Or does it really blend and you're trying to hopefully direct people to the right place based on the content in the ad? Or
So from a creative standpoint, what we always tell our creative agencies is when you're writing the copy, say for professionals only, or for physicians only, or patient only. So we could divide it, and we always try to tell our creative teams too that think of it as you're an ACP. They're not looking for boo-boos. They're looking for scientific terms. I have a boo-boo. Okay, I'm going to look that up. Versus a doctor will find some medical Latin term that I can't pronounce because I'm not a doctor. But so when it comes to paid search, we do divide it by patient and ACP, and we try to make it 2 different campaigns.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question, and it's a really good one. Yeah, you do it with ad copy, of course, but I know on a lot of the HCP campaigns that I'm running, paid search is the foundation. But I'm like, how are we spending this much money in paid search? There's only a finite number of HCPs. Are they really searching that at that volume? But then you get the ROI. You see how happy the clients are with their site traffic, and you're like, it's worth it.
Oh yeah, search is definitely a must-have, like just one of those foundational tactics. And there's definitely the delineation between the patient and the HCP as well. And looking at the overlap strategies to make sure that everything's being done efficiently and we're not bidding against ourselves with different things. So just making sure that they're really strategic and separate.
yeah,
And just to add too, from the publisher side, what we're seeing on the search side is that our Google, well, nobody's here from Google, because then I'm not going to have YouTube a service, but we're seeing Google playing around with like their algorithms, their impression share. Like every time we play around with our bidding, we get a quick email from them. Oh, you could spend more money. Oh, thank you, Google. Oh yeah, you could spend more money with us. You could spend more money with us. So it's really, we're looking at it as they're really being, especially in the last, since they switched their creative process, really aggressive trying to get more money from us. There's a thing called impression share, like how many times somebody's actually typing in your keyword and how many times your text ads pop up. Make a long story short, they've been really promoting, telling us that we need to spend more money. And we have a finite budget. We can't keep constantly putting money into search without losing our branding opportunity. So from the publisher side, that's something to consider. Google, although it's easy for us as consumers, they are trying to take market share or dollars from us or from campaign, your side of the campaign.
Yeah, and from a publisher perspective, a lot of your content's going to end up in the search anyway, just by the nature of the content being there, right? But the overall ecosystem is there's also paid advertising going on there that could direct people other places. And publishers probably need to do more to play in that space as well and make sure that it's not just relying on good content to pop up to the top of the list.
Yeah, just don't bid on our branded terms.
Yeah. You mentioned programmatic before, and I think that's something that we should definitely dive into. I mean, how has that changed over the last few years? How much more of what you're doing today is being done programmatically? How effective is it? How many are there good options out there to be buying programmatically?
Yeah, I mean, I would say programmatic for HCPs is another fundamental, and really looking at it as part of the media mix. It's come a long way over the years, and I feel it's even evolving in a sense of the different things that you could do from a targeting standpoint, and being able to reach the appropriate HCPs. I would say, though, from a programmatic standpoint, it has, in the sense that it has come a long way. I think, in the ability, it all comes back to that targeting aspect.
Yeah, I think the data has gotten so much better. The DSPs have gotten more specialized telehealth care. So what we saw like 5 years ago in terms of effectiveness has drastically changed. So I think, yeah, it's a foundation. I think some plans, 50% of it could be executed programmatically now. And, sometimes it's really great for certain brands too, and brands with small budgets. And where even if they want to get into a more endemic space because, you see higher performance there, we can set up private marketplace deals. So as more publishers make their inventory available through those private marketplaces, there's probably going to be less and less direct buys. And a lot of times, even for brands that have smaller budgets, like from an agency perspective, we don't have the bandwidth to contract with 10 different publishers. So going programmatic just makes sense because it's like a one-stop shop for us. There are certain campaigns I don't think it works well for, like unbranded campaigns, because you do need that contextual relevance. A lot of times you are trying to get more editorial content to feed into that, like a market shaping campaign. But I agree. It's a foundation now.
We use programmatic as a frequency buy. Now, the one thing I always get asked from the publisher side is, should I put my inventory on the exchanges? My answer is no. You guys have great inventory, great content. Why cheapen your content by going on a bidding system? So it's one thing, like a lot of publishers, always ask that question, hey, if I do an exchange, would you buy us? Well, no, I'm not buying you. The robot's buying you. I'm going to pay $20 versus a $200 CPM. So it's one thing, if you have your inventory, my advice, now this could be controversial, but my advice is own your inventory. Don't put it on exchanges. You start to do that, you're going to get characters like myself trying to get it cheaper. And then I'm not going back.
Yes, but it's better than not selling it at all. So I do, but there is something to be said for, there is a value in content. And you can obviously see that through the performance. So you guys have to pay your editorial staff. So it all comes down to, where that needs to be funded. And how much is going to end up transitioning to programmatic, because we may then just, you may not get any inventory if that's the continued trend. And I think the way HCP consumption habits are going, they don't necessarily need to go to those endemic websites anymore. They're starting to get a little bit more comfortable getting their information somewhere else. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, and I mean, I would, respectfully disagree with James to some extent. While I wouldn't recommend doing anything 100% programmatically, there's definitely a time and a place for it. I would say an awareness campaign would be that perfect example of where to do it. And I wouldn't recommend for every publisher to just put all of their inventory up in the exchange. I think certain tactics, maybe looking at run of site, things like that, there is so much value in the contextual adjacencies that I wouldn't want to miss those. Those are things that I would still want to buy direct through publisher, just because they're really an important part of the mix. And that's what it is. You want to look at the overarching media mix to make sure that you have the different touch points, doing the different things, working the different objectives, pulling through the different strategy. So with all of this, I wouldn't say it's one way or the other. It's really looking at it holistically to make sure that you're reaching it from every angle.
No, I agree with that part. I mean, we definitely have to do endemic sites, but then we use programmatic, for frequency when they're not on the endemic sites, when they're on the Weathers and the CNN and the Wall Street Journal. And we also see better results on the endemic site because they're in that frame, that mindset. I'm looking for this position, I'm looking for this, oh, look at that. manner. So it's important. What I really wanted to emphasize is like when you do have extra inventory, do you really put it on the exchanges if you're a publisher? Or do you hold it and give added value? Do you hold it and lower your CPMs? Do you hold it? So it's that kind of, from a buying standpoint, I agree with the team here that yes, it's easier for me to do programmatically, but when you look at it long term, is it really worth putting your extra inventory on the exchanges?
When you're doing an awareness campaign and you're buying programmatically and you're going on non-endemic sites, are you whitelisting or blacklisting sites there? Because I mean, you know, within our world, it's fine. It can go wherever it goes because, you know, whether it's going on, you know, JAMA or Medscape or New England doesn't really make a difference. But, you know, do you have a short list of places where you're comfortable having non-endemic advertising appear?
Yeah, we 100% whitelist, blacklist, and we actually do it, you know, a couple times during the week to really go into it because stuff does creep up. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I had all this traffic coming up from a gangster hip hop music for cardiologists. Okay, 1, 2 clicks, but not 4,000 clicks. So, you know, we're always trying to look into it.
I want to circle back to what you were saying about kind of buying directly from the publishers. And one of the things we talked about is, even though you're willing to do that, the whole concept of like a flat rate run of site ad or whatever is not where you want to go. You've got to have other ways of pricing it and other ways of measuring it, right? So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I know flat rate buys are like a big thing now because they can encompass multiple different types of tactics sometimes. We always end up converting them into a different pricing model. Because we need to evaluate them against all the other tactics. So there is a type of standardization that we need on our end, and we are trying to understand what we're going to get out of it in terms of impression volume or engagements. How are you defining an engagement is one of my biggest pet peeves because everyone defines them differently and they could be more or less impactful based off of your definition. So a lot of times it's not very clear in the proposals that we're getting back, like what are we really getting if it's like a flat rate buy?
Yeah, I don't like talking about the F word. I prefer to, I prefer to avoid flat where possible. In certain circumstances, it's obviously needed. But yeah, like we would look to convert it just to see at least what we're getting. And I think all about, you know, at the point where you're looking at tactics, when you're negotiating, when you're going into the buying season, is understanding what those engagements are and having those conversations up front to make sure that you know what you're buying, and it's not when you're working on the report. Oh, no, we're just looking at this. No, that's something that upfront, you know, within the RFP is something that we want to have those discussions on.
How do you even, I mean, like when you think about direct buys, especially where a publisher may not be able to provide PLD, for example, how do sites end up on your list to start with? I mean, are you just kind of spraying it out to everybody and say respond to the RFP, or do you have a select group where you value the content, or you know that the physicians value the content? You know, what's that process of getting sites onto a list to start with, even to find out what inventory may be available, what they may be able to deliver in terms of impressions?
Well, Dave, we use Kantar ranking.
It wasn't a setup.
Cheap shot.
No, I do think our clients are really smart too. Like we look at historical performance. When it is a publisher that cannot provide PLT, oftentimes it's a society or an association that they really want to work with. They know it's credible. They know the audience quality is fantastic. They're working with them from conference support. So yeah, that's like when we would kind of like take the leap beyond like those who can do target list targeting or provide that physician level data back.
I would agree completely. I mean, we wouldn't make a whole campaign out of that, but we would certainly look at a publisher if they're the right audience and we know that they're the right audience and they have that quality and longevity in the market. That's something that we're always, open to have discussions with.
Yeah, we normally do like an 80-20 kind of thing, and this is when experience counts. You know that I won't mention publishers because most of them are here, but there are certain publishers who, look, I don't have to look at the plan. I know you're going to perform. I know the rate. I'll send you the insertion order. But then I always push the team. I say, take 20% of your budget. Let's try something new. Because we'll keep getting stuck in the same rut if we're buying the same thing. Why don't we try something new? Let's try, get ourselves in trouble, make sure we have an out clause, but really push ourselves to get into something new. Because, best way to describe it, a lot of the new stuff that wasn't here 5 years ago is here now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's also a really good reason to engage your planning teams outside of the RFP season, because that's when we're always thinking about next year, because RFP season is madness. So when we're like, oh, this would be a great for this plan, we just have no money at this point. So, but we do think about it throughout and during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, planning is a 365, 24/7 activity. We are always looking and learning, wanting to see what's new, wanting to see what's out there. Even if there isn't necessarily an opportunity at the moment, there's always next year. There's always hopefully incremental. We're like, our job is not done when everything is booked solid. To the point of new, I would also like to make, we're not necessarily looking for net new publisher off the streets. We want to work with our existing publishers, our existing relationships, the tried and true, where our clients have had past success, to see what type of new tactics we might be able to bring to market. There's definitely that level of trust and level of, okay, we know that we could work through this together. And that's where we've seen so many of those successes, taking a new to market tactic with our existing publishers.
What would some of the, are you thinking about things like different media types like podcasts and video and things like that? Or is it other, different approaches to, I don't know. When you say like new types of tactics from existing relationships, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, those are excellent examples. You think about the podcasts and the videos of the world, also looking at different contextual types of opportunities. Those are ever evolving as well. Those are things that HCPs are eagerly reading and seeking out. So being able to partner, just beyond, I'm going to date myself by saying spots and dots, but beyond, just the traditional banner.
And just to add too, I know you guys on the sales side, you guys do your annual retreats, always somewhere nice and warm. Good for you guys. But once you come back from that retreat, share that information with us. There might be something that your management is saying we should do something, or is something new in the tool, even beta stuff. Clients love the word, they don't like to pay for it, but they love the word beta. They want to be first. They want to be like, hey, we're hearing about it now. So when you come back from your sales place in nice and toasty Las Vegas, bring that information back to us.
Yeah, I think we're always looking for strategic partnerships. So it's good to engage your agency teams and be like, well, what is the client tasking you with at a higher level to it? So for instance, we could have, and this is happening on the HCP side now, diversity and inclusion goals. So which publishers out there are addressing that? Not many right now. And then there could be things like HCP and consumer integration tactics. So who's addressing that? Who has offerings like that? And that comes at a higher level that then has to be, those types of offerings are then pushed down to real, across the brands, because it's an initiative that is taking place across the board.
What's the best way for the salespeople to connect with your groups around that now that we're not in an environment where, every month they're having a lunch and learn with your teams, everybody's virtual. Is it just reach out to the planners that they're working with? Is it reaching out at your level? What's an effective way to get those great ideas into your hands?
Yeah, I think it's reaching out at our level. So the group directors who are managing across brands usually have insight into what needs to be done at a portfolio level. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm always happy to take those calls just to get the new learnings of what's going on. I encourage my team to do the same, to bring that back up to me. And just even with inter-agency sharing and inter-team sharing, just making sure if there's something going on, we're communicating it even casually, just to get like a little group together to take a call to learn more. I think that's something that we're always looking for. And just reaching out is the best way.
And just to add too, I mean, we're dealing with different demographics. I have a young team. Think about low attention span theater. If you're going to write a whole page of email like that goes on and on, they're not reading it. Okay, guys, come on. Unless you're like, and you get $1 million, no, they're not reading it. Think about your audience. Think about their mindset. They are really, it's emoji world. They don't do it in our emails, but just keep in mind, keep it short, sweet, and concise. A couple of lines, bang. You could write long letters to me, that's fine, but don't. Just keep that in mind when you're communicating with planners and supervisors.
I want to circle back to a programmatic related question. As programmatic is becoming more and more, a substantial part of the buy, is list matching going down as programmatic is going up, or is there still pressure from the client, I think, on the list match side, and how are you balancing that out?
I think so. Yeah, we'll always do list matches. I think the challenge with it is that sometimes we don't get the level of granularity in that list match that we need. So we'll get oh, this is a match to the entire database, but we actually want the match for the program that we're going to be executing. So how many are we actually going to reach? I don't want to know that you have all these people in your database. I want to know how many have been on your site in the last 90 days, and how much do I need to purchase to even get to that number. So we do them. It gives us directional type of information. To do it right takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I'd say it's still very important, but to do it right and to get the right information back. I mean, I think looking at the recency is really important. Who's been on the sites 30, 60, 90 days, not just looking at one clump of matching. And then going into the segmentation as well, being able to identify which segments might be more active than others, and then break that down so that you could plan accordingly there. So no, I think it's something that is going to continue to be a focus. And I think it's going to be something that will be more strategic and more nuanced to ensure that we're slicing and dicing and reaching the people in the right way. I think it's just going to get more complex.
And some of that gets down to differentiated messaging and
Oh, yeah.
Different volume of activity at different segments. And
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting. When we think about the overall digital landscape and some of the emerging, everything from, I'm seeing Peter sitting there, but advertising and messaging going on in EHRs, and the podcasts and the CTV and everything else are there challenges to each of these individual tactics? What are the biggest challenges? If we think about the major tactics that you're using, is it Is it creative? I mean, are there limitations on what you can do? Is it a challenge in terms of being able to get good metrics out of it? Is it a challenge in social media where, you know, a third of the doctors just aren't doing it, period? When you think about those challenges, which ones really stand out for you, I guess, on an individual tactic basis?
This is my bane of my existence, is the ISI. You know, think about it. TV could say, yeah, you know, take this drug, you might get a headache. Good, 60 seconds are done. And we have to put all this legal information here in our creative, in our podcasting that nobody's listening to. So it's something I think, you know, as a future, as a group, as an organization, we need to work with the government to say, do we really still need an ISI if nobody's reading it? So that's one of our handcuffs when it comes to creativity of podcasting, doing stuff with Alexa is, yes, I need an ISI. And then suddenly it gets stuck because now you have a 6-minute commercial. You know, it's difficult.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many channels I want to get into, and we just can't because of the creative limitations. My biggest channel that we've had challenges with is actually email, like with the open rate, privacy. It's just causing so much to be unknown about like what engagement really looks like now. During COVID, emails became the primary method to talk to HCPs, and now is it starting to be overdone? So I feel like that channel specifically, we always get a lot of questions about. The other,
And just to interrupt
yeah.
on that, is that kind of bifurcated between email newsletters, something coming from a publisher, versus a direct email being pushed out by your client?
Yeah, I mean, I think the measurement component is there for both, because we don't know who's like scrubbing out false opens, who's not, what email platform they're using, because they all use different methodologies. So yeah, I think it's across both. I think so we don't know like where the trend is going anymore, because our historicals don't make sense anymore. So we'll have to set up new ones, but that's kind of like the one channel that's been a bit of a challenge of recent.
Yeah, and I would also say it's, you know, overarching knowing the role of the channel and making sure that that's done in a correct way and mirroring the message accordingly. When that's done right, you know, there's no telling of like the success that you could have. But when you're trying to have a banner to all of your work, you know, that you're going to run into some roadblocks there. So it's really just understanding where you're placing the media and making sure that the right message is there.
Does it, like when you think about social, is there a difference along those lines between doctors using consumer social, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, versus the professional, you know, the Doximities and Sermos of the world?
Oh, totally. In my mind, they're definitely like separated into two different things, albeit both very important in different ways. But I would want to use those in different ways, and really understanding how to make the most out of them and to understand the mindset of the user while they're on those different channels.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a place for publishers associations to have their own social channels, or is it more important for them to get content into the existing channels that are out there on the social side?
I think you definitely should do something with social. I mean, look at it as a traffic driver for your site. You know, you have your SEO, you have your fan base, but it's also another option to drive traffic to your site. So yes, I would definitely look into it. And also, there's times that we could sponsor I have to be careful because we our agency is not using Twitter anymore. You guys probably guess why, but that's a different story. But, you know, those are the kind of innovations we're looking for. Are you using Facebook, Instagram, and how do we get involved in that too? Just new ideas to come up with.
So we're at the end of Q1. People have seen what the advertising landscape looks like so far this year. A lot going on in the general economy. Where are you seeing things for your clients right now? Are the budgets there? Are they at risk? How are things going to, what's the outlook for this year in terms of advertising in general and digital advertising specifically?
So without going into all the paperwork, but we're kind of being really conservative this year. And look, we live in a recession-proof kind of universe, but we don't. So a lot of these corner office folks are looking at the stock market. They are looking at interest rates. And also, if you look at the patient side too, like if you look at the historical data, like 2008, when they were cutting their pills in half or taking it every other day. So to answer your question, we see our budgets being flat. We don't see it growing this year. And we also see like a lot of clients holding on to their wallet. Doesn't mean, they're just being really conservative this year.
Yeah, I'm wondering how it's going to play out because personal promotion is so much more expensive than non-personal promotion, but MPP can't really fill in all the gaps of what personal promotion can fulfill. But I'm wondering if, with the way the market's going or, as there's budget cuts, like organizationally, will they rely more on non-personal promotion or do they, I think we as the agency need to show them the value of it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see which way it goes.
Yeah, and I would say looking at it conservatively is definitely an approach to take. I mean, really digging back into the historicals and making sure that all of the investments are truly well thought out and that we know that, okay, if we're going to be doing tactic A, B, and C, that we're anticipating getting, the results that we're expecting. While, I love always looking at new and innovative things, I don't necessarily think that 2023 is going to be the year to blow them out of the water. I would love to do as much as possible, but I think to the extent too, just really, relying on that historical, relying on all the research, relying on what we know, just to make sure that the dollar is acting as hard as it can.
You mentioned before the fact that I'm going to expand on this a little bit, but we've got specialties where there are a limited number of doctors. Oncology comes to mind over and over and over and over again. Anything with rare disease, where a lot of the new products are in areas where there just aren't that many people in the audience to reach. Do you think your clients understand and appreciate that, or are there expectations in terms of how many people are going to be reached, how frequently, kind of at an unreasonable level, or do you think that they have an understanding that there may only be 1,000 doctors in a target? And as an agency, are you able to push back on that when they don't understand that?
Oh yeah, we tell them. Yeah. Because we hear it, like there's there's inventory issues, there's scale issues. We can't spend the money you want to spend because unless we broaden up our reach somehow. We can do that strategically with a lot of data we have, but yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation.
Yeah, and the inventory issue, I mean, is huge because, I think especially if anybody's come in from more of a consumer mindset where it's like, it's unlimited inventory when you get right down to it, right? And it's not that way at all in this environment. And some of it in getting back to like the direct buys and things like that, but on quality sites, it's gone. There's just no opportunity. So
Yeah, I mean, our clients definitely rely on us to be strategic and be the subject matter experts to guide them in the right way. Whether it be level set in the beginning, thinking outside of the box, thinking about, how to make sure that the personal and non-personal efforts are really working together, so that you are having everything integrated and holistic. I mean, it's definitely a big conversation and a big thing to focus on. But I think, in the right hands, it's something that is achievable.
Yeah, and with my clients, we are always having this kind of conversation. How, I always joke with my staff. I said, how do we make their 99 cents look like $1? How do we do this? And a lot of it is education. When they're like, oh, I'm going to spend $1,000, I'm like, I have to be diplomatic and say, nobody's seen that. Just give it back to your shareholders. Of course, I can't say that. I can say it in front of you guys, it's being recorded. But we always try to really show them how big the universe is and really what's their competition. Could they play in this space? Or do you carve out a niche of a niche of a niche and really focus on that? Go with the big fish, or which you might get two.
Yeah, and like oncology is such an interesting space because they do like the traditional platforms and publishers, but it's gone, like inventory is gone. And then, so what do we have left? We're looking at the more consumerist channels. Are those going to be effective for that type of specialty? So you have to, and I think that's where the creative agency comes into play, and we have to work alongside them to understand okay, if you add a KOL into this mix, will it change things? Will it change how you appear on social to be more impactful? Hopefully there's more things that end up being able to go through programmatic means in order to open up some inventory that way. But yeah, it's always a challenge.
I also think it's about not putting all of your eggs in one basket. It's where you really need to take the audience-centric approach and a multi-touchpoint, multimedia mix approach, where if you can't necessarily reach someone in a digital space, that's where you look at the print, you look at the cover wraps, you look at traditional mailers, the direct mail type things. That's where you go a little bit old school, where you really have that as part of the holistic mix, again, to make sure that you're reaching the audience and not just being clutter.
Yeah. And it is, it's that if you're talking about family medicine, it's a whole different story than if you're talking about a narrowly defined oncology audience.
And just to add too, I mean, if you look at the FDA website, it's free information. You can see all the drugs that are coming out. There's no blockbuster, drugs that are coming out. It's all rare disease. It's finer and smaller audience. So that's the trend. I mean, just look at the site. There's no blockbuster drugs coming out of her. So
Which
it's just
is an opportunity for the publishers. I mean, if they can develop the content, if they can have the inventory, it's there. We talked about the relationship with the clients, but what about the relationship with the publishers in terms of transparency up front around campaign objectives and then communication throughout the campaign, feedback from their analytics teams and things like that? How important is that, and how do we encourage that?
That's so important. I mean, just having that transparency, having the communication up front. My teams will always send out really thoroughly detailed RFPs, but then we're open to the conversation as well, just to make sure that the sales reps that we're working with truly understand our objectives. They tend to be a little complex in terms of the RFPs, but I think just level setting the beginning, the communication in the beginning, regular check-ins just to make sure that everyone's on the same page before going into market, making sure that everyone's aligned of the KPIs. I mean, that's necessary. You can't come back after 11 months and say, well, we were looking actually for this KPI, but so why didn't you? Right. It's communication. It's transparency and communication about the goals.
Yeah, I think it's like pretty obvious when we get proposals back who's read the RFP. You can tell by what's being recommended right away if they understand the brand and what your objectives are. But yes, communication, understanding what the source of truth is for the client, because like some campaigns use Crossix, and publishers can work with Crossix in a way where you can like have better data come through in that measurement platform. But then if you look at PLD, it could be a big discrepancy. So understanding what we're looking at and what the client is going to be graded on and what we're grading on isn't really important.
And just to add, you guys, I mean, people in the audience on video, are the experts of your site. So we have a list of 20 different sites, publishers. We can't look at everything every day, but you guys are there. Call us up and say, hey guys, we could fix this. We could change it. You know, the campaign's only up for 2 weeks and we're seeing that creative A, B, and C is doing awful, but you know, the first creative is doing great. You know, something like that. You guys have the pulse, you have the data. Let us know. We could talk together and say, how do we fix this campaign versus, hey, it's the end of the month and oh, it didn't do so well. Well, you know, we could have fixed it. You know, the best part about digital is that it's a fixable medium, but we need your help.
How much are you optimizing in flight? I mean, is it set it and forget it, or for every campaign pretty much, is it you're looking for those numbers coming back and then you're adjusting and you're modifying and I mean, it's probably a rhetorical question, but it's
It's constant, yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime there's reporting, we have to have some type of insight or recommendation to make for sure.
Never set it and forget it. We're always looking at it.
Yeah,
We're
and
watching.
at Evoke, the planners are responsible for buying and planning and analytics. So at the end of the day, they could fix it. You know, change costs. This is, you have skin in the game. You recommended it. I trusted you.
Yeah.
Did you fix it? Versus, oh yeah, I saw that boat continue to sink and sink and sink. That's good.
but that also gives opportunity for the publishers to help with those adjustments and even have opportunities if maybe they didn't make it in the first round, but they can offer something that can help.
I mean, we don't
Land
make
the
the
campaign.
creative, so you're not going to hurt our feelings. Say, hey, your creative's awful. Thank you. You know, let us know so we can at least go back to the creative agency, or at least have a side conversation with the client and say, hey, we're seeing it across the board the creative's not doing so well.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else you guys want to touch on? Anything you want to share with the publishers?
The one thing, let's say in the last 2 years, what I've been hearing more and more, and the big thing is, I'm going to be straight with you guys, as always, is, banners don't work. Fine. Somebody's clicking on this stuff, engaging with the website, but, forget that part. They're looking for more and more kind of engagements, kind of opportunities. Like, how do, I always use this example. It's like, we could drive them to your, site, or we could rent a room in Times Square and get all the action. So that's where when we're looking at sites is like, how do we get that kind of digital high impact? How do we live on your site? How do we get that kind of engagement that's turnkey, easy to do, easy to convince the client, look, you just have to give me 3 assets, give me an email, and just do it. Okay, great. Something simple, something you don't have to go through their med-legal department, but just think of your sites as an engagement platform versus a place to hold banners.
Yeah, one thing that's not paid media focused, but I feel like could still add value is we're getting pretty rich data back in terms of like who we're reaching and engagement, but a lot of times the clients still have issues understanding the HCPs. So like when you're a niche publisher, you know what editorial's working really well. you understand what they're engaging with. We don't necessarily know that, the client doesn't necessarily know that, like what is actually resonating and what topics are trending. That could be good added value to provide, and another reason to partner.
And that may even play out even more so in some of the sort of allied health areas, the MPs and PAs,
Yeah,
the
for sure.
oncology nurse, a pathologist, a pharmacist. If the publishers have that information where the client may not necessarily understand what role they play.
Yeah, we get questions about NPs and PAs all the time because they're hidden in the data a lot of times. So if there's an understanding of how they're behaving, I think that's fantastic.
And they're consuming media on physician-directed
Yes.
sites. I mean, they're not only in
Right.
their NPPA world, and so that's really valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, just kind of as a last thought, while we look at so many different factors when putting together a media recommendation and putting together a campaign, we know that everything is going to be, increasingly more PLD driven and increasingly more omni-travel. Omni-travel. I want to travel right now. No, omni-channel driven. So we know, that's what's up next. So we just really, ask for your help in moving forward as a partnership with us, as we're trying to, make sure that our clients are, really ahead of the curve and just, meeting all of those advanced digital needs. I think that's going to be like the really important step in the future.
That's great. How about Q&A? Do people have questions for our brilliant panelists up here? I think that there's a mic in the back if people do have questions.
Hi, good morning. You guys did great. James, you mentioned the engagement, and throughout, a common theme throughout the presentation was reach and frequency. Can you just touch upon the depth of engagement and how that impacts and how that's being interpreted and ingested from a data standpoint and making decisions moving forward?
So when we talk about engagement, there's a couple of times different types of engagement. Like, for example, if I had a client who had a video and I put that video on your site, that's an engagement. Or we have a KOL and then watching it, that's a deep engagement. Or there's a Q&A kind of question, that's a deep engagement. Now, of course, as a buyer, I'll pay more for that versus engagement of, hey, just a banner on your site. Well, that's not really a big engagement. That's a CPM buy. So when you're talking to your planners and they're talking about engagements, that's what they're looking for. That kind of, oh, I'm engaged, I'm sticky to it.
Okay, is there like a time and media component to it that they're looking for?
Well, the official, as a buyer, I disagree with it, but the official IAB is like two seconds. But that's the IAB standard. So of course we would love to get more, like 15 seconds, a minute, but it really depends on your data and your research to say, hey, these doctors are spending this much time and we'll guarantee X number of seconds. But the IAB standards, I don't know, it wasn't there. It was 2 seconds.
No, that's helpful, thanks.
Other questions?
Guys, we're here all morning.
Well, great. Hank.
Hi, Hank Blaney from Elsevier. I used to go on sales calls at ad agencies and inside pharma companies, but I don't really do that as much. Now I'm kind of Zooming. Are you guys seeing sales reps in person? And what's the best way to get on someone's schedule in the ad agency world?
Yeah, I think we're still seeing people in person. My team's mostly remote, so it is actually difficult. It needs to be coordinated well in advance. We need to tell people to go in the office. It's a different world we're living in for sure. So it's they're fewer than they used to be for sure. But I think if you work with we have a digital partnerships team that will help with those specific needs now.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, like, I'm using Evoke, like, my closest employee, team member is 2.5 hours away from here. So I think the landscape has changed. It's really, I mean, that could be a whole different topic of how do we talk to media people when they're not living in the same house anymore. It's really difficult, But if you're going to do it and you're going to promise, keep it short and sweet. Don't book an hour, book a half an hour. And make sure you have like 15 minutes of content so you get their attention. It's a different kind of mindset. They're home. A lot of them, I forced my team to put their beautiful faces on the camera, but a lot of people don't do that anymore. But, it's harder to get it on the calendar now because people are all over the place. There's no, hey, let me go see them. So it's something I think as the industry, both sides have to really know how to work this out and how to figure it out in the new world.
What about even at industry events, meetings like this? I mean, this isn't necessarily the right environment for a business discussion, but maybe a group like AMM could set up sessions that were more that way with like roundtable discussions or whatever, where more planners could come in, and then the publishers would have opportunities to, I don't know, give a pitch, but I mean, talk about creative ideas and brainstorm on new strategies.
Just to follow up, we do have this room until 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I'd say one of the beauties that did come out of the COVID era is just agencies giving opportunities to work remote. But sometimes that means that you're working with people across the country. So just saying, all right, let's have an in-person meeting is a challenge. But I think it's looking to the agencies to kind of clump geographically or kind of buddy up for different meetings, and also, defer to the Zoom meetings when possible. I think it's going to have to be that hybrid, and just however you could reach us. I mean, we're there and love the interaction still.
Throw really good parties.
And don't be disappointed if one person is drowning at work and they're typing. Don't let that throw off your song and dance. It's just, they're listening, but they have to do something. So just keep it short and sweet. The old days of, hey, let's meet for an hour are gone. Let's meet for, half an hour or 15 minutes. Wow, that's great. I have 15 minutes. Perfect.
Yeah, that said, I do think we want to make sure that you guys see us as partners and that we see you as partners. So if you ever feel like there is something we could be doing better or that you want our full attention, like make it known. I think that needs to be called out more and more these days. So.
Great. Well, Michelle, Liz, James, thank you so much. This was great. Your input was wonderful.
One more question.
One more question. Yeah. Please.
I'm just curious to hear a bit more about PLD. I guess I have two questions. How you guys are using it internally and how you're passing it over to your client and how it's being used on their end. And then overall, how you're using it omni-channel and how you're using that to track, different programs that you're running. I'm curious if there's like a 50,000-foot view down on it across channels with different PLD that you're getting. And then secondly, just the future of PLD too, with everything going on with GDPR and privacy policies. I mean, how long do you think it's going to be around for?
We gave her the mic and she gave us 5 questions. One question.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, well, it's a great question, and I think that's really at a brand level, if not at the pharma company level, of what exactly they're doing with it and how far developed they are within an omni-channel structure, how equipped they are on the data side, how much they're leaning in to the data analysts and data teams within the agencies. So there are so many different variables that I think if you ask me on any given day, you'll get a different answer if you ask any of us, any of our clients. So I think that's definitely something that's subject to the brand discretion, really. But definitely, I mean, I would say a goal of even the least data tech savvy brands of wanting to get to that point. PLD going away, that's actually not something I've thought of. It's going to be around forever. No, I think that is one of the beauties of the HCP space that I think we are going to have for a while. It might change formats. It might change in terms of what we're able to truly record. But I think just based on the nuance of the field and the industry, I think that we're safe for a little bit.
I'm on the other side because we're getting closer and closer to the patient. And like we in this room could say, okay, we're not going to get that close, but we are getting closer and closer to the patient. And then there's going to be that tipping point when the Wall Street Journal, New York Times will write about it, and we're all going to be scrambling. So are we there yet? I don't know yet, but I think we're getting really close. We just have, as an industry, we need to, it's a whole different discussion. We have to be careful. And from like Evoke's point of view, like we try not to touch the data at all. We just go, here you go, client, don't send it right to them. We didn't see anything.
And as Michelle was saying, I mean, there are some clients who know what to do with it and others who just feel they want it because they've lived in this environment for so long of so much information about the doctors that this is just one more component of that. Okay, we'll try the thank you and applause one more time. Thanks, guys.